Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar, and thank you for joining us today for the launch of our 2018 UK Salary Guide. By way of brief introduction, I'm Linda Todd, and I've worked at Hays for 12 years, and I'm the Senior Manager of Hays Procurement and Supply Chain in London. I'm joined today by Trudy Salandiak, who is a PR Manager at SIPS. Trudy will be talking us through how procurement and supply chain professionals are tackling the issues of Brexit. To kick off though, I will first talk you through the findings of our 2018 Salary and Recruiting Trends Guide. Please note that today's presentation will be recorded and available to view on the Hays website shortly after the presentation. This is the fourth year we've produced our UK Guide, covering over 9,000 salaries across 12 specialist areas throughout the UK. It is based on salary information provided by 1,900 recruiting experts from our 94 UK offices. As well as using our own extensive insight to inform the guide, we also launched a survey designed to ascertain employee satisfaction, employers' concerns, and gather general insight into the market. This secured around 17,500 responses from employers and employees. To start, let's set the scene by quickly recapping last year's overall UK findings. In 2016, prior to the EU referendum, 62% of organisations expected their business activity to increase. 73% said they were planning to recruit. There was a 1.8% average salary increase, and 62% of employees were considering moving jobs. However, against the backdrop of continued economic and political uncertainty, and in the face of an increasingly tight labour market, we're here to look at how the employment market is faring for the procurement, supply chain and logistics professionals today. Let's take a look at what our results showed in more detail. Let's start with the positives. Employers in the industry are optimistic about the market and their business. Last year, nearly 2/3 of procurement, supply chain and logistics employers expected their activity to increase in the next 12 months. This has dipped slightly this year to 53%, which is below the UK average of 59%. Reassuringly, the vast majority of industry employers continue to expect activity to increase or stay the same. This is in line with the overall UK average. This is a very positive indicator about the overall health of the UK economy. Although there is obviously ongoing uncertainty, employers' business outlook remains robust. Reflecting this continued business confidence, employers' plans for recruitment and investing in their people strategies have grown. We looked at organisations' plans to recruit over the coming 12 months, and positively, just over 2/3 stated that they were planning to recruit over the coming 12 months. This is a decrease from 74% of industry employers last year who said they planned to recruit, which may be linked to the current uncertainty in the market. Despite this slight reduction in expected hiring, it clearly remains a top priority for employers. Of those employers looking to hire, 52% state that they plan to hire more permanent staff this year, and 28% plan to hire higher volumes of temporary, interim or contract professionals. This focus on permanent hiring shows a continued trend we have seen from previous years, as employers show a preference for the continuity with stakeholders and suppliers that permanent employees can provide, as well as being able to build longer-term relationships with these stakeholders. Despite this positive outlook and employers charging ahead with both business and hiring plans, they are faced with huge recruitment challenges. In fact, we may currently be in one of the toughest recruitment markets in recent years. Let's take a look at what our results showed in more detail. Let's start with the maybe obvious but still pertinent point regarding skills shortages. Skills shortages are ever present and intensifying in the profession, in particular as an increasing number of employers transition their procurement teams from a tactical to a more strategic function. 73% of procurement, supply chain and logistics employers say that a shortage of suitable applicants is their top recruitment challenge for the coming year. It is also evident that skills shortages are having a significant impact on organisations and are likely to continue to do so. Over 3/4 of employers stated that they have experienced moderate to extreme skills shortages, which is greater than the overall UK average of 70%. Of these, 16% labelled them as extreme, with only 5% of employers stating they had not experienced any skills shortages at all. We have mainly seen softer skills being high in demand rather than the more technical skills, which are often harder for organisations to find, both whether they are using a recruiter or an in-house recruitment team. In comparison to other sectors, procurement, supply chain and logistics is 5th highest of the list of sectors we surveyed who are struggling to find the right talent. In fact, 77% of all UK employers say that a shortage of suitable candidates is their #1 recruitment challenge. Looking more closely at the skills most in demand, leadership and managerial skills top the list, followed by projects and change skills. Both of these skill sets are significantly more highly sought after by procurement, supply chain and logistics employers than across the UK overall, at 34% and 26% respectively. The demand for managerial skills is being intensified by a lack of experienced candidates at this level. We have therefore seen salaries increasing for these kinds of roles, including procurement managers, group procurement managers and senior buyers, as employers try to attract candidates with the skills they need. The need for projects and change management skills is being driven by the large number of transformation projects taking place across a number of industries, as the profession continues to transition from a tactical to a strategic function in order to improve processes and drive better cost efficiencies. As a result, professionals with the experience and capacity to influence wider business strategy are needed in order to make this change. Other skills high in demand for industry employers include operations and technical data and analytics, administration and IT infrastructure. For those employers looking for skill sets that typically come from experience, looking to other approaches to hiring may be pertinent during skills short times. For example, hiring temporary, contract or interim workers may hold the answer to filling skills gaps in the short term to meet peaks in demand, but greater investment in development and training in order to hire and consequently upskill more junior candidates or taking on apprentices should be considered. The skills shortages are attributed to problems with both the attraction and retention of talent. Just under 2/3 of employers believe that high competition for talent within the marketing is fueling shortages. This highlights the importance of investing in your employer brand in order to better compete for talent. Employers need to make sure they stand out with a distinct offering that will appeal specifically to the type of candidate they require. In addition, skills shortages are being further fueled by fewer professionals entering the procurement, supply chain and logistics job market, with 34% of employers saying this is another main cause of the shortage of skills facing their profession. To address the immediate problem of skills shortages, 44% of employers are looking to temporary and contract staff. Furthermore, 22% of employers are increasing their use of recruitment agencies, which have access to a wider passive candidate pool with the softer skills that employers are looking for. 17% are also increasing their training budget, and the same percentage are transferring employees into the skills shortage areas in order to upskill their current workforce and to overcome skills shortages. Employers are also facing the challenge of salary discontent amongst procurement, supply chain and logistics professionals, despite above average increases. The average salary increase for roles in the industry has been 2.1%, which is above the overall UK salary increase of 1.8%, and 69% of employers increased salaries last year. Looking at the picture regionally, Wales, the East and the southwest of England have all seen some of the highest rises on average. This is mainly due to a greater number of organisations investing and moving their procurement functions to these regions, which is creating competition for the limited number of skilled and experienced professionals available. Taking a closer look at salary rises by profession, we can see that some of the highest average increases were seen in procurement roles, with professionals receiving a 2.7% salary rise on average. Softer skills in procurement are often in greater demand, and there is a high competition between organisations for candidates with these skills. As a result, many employers are increasing salaries as they attempt to retain or attract these candidates. In addition, logistics roles saw average salary increases in line with the overall UK average, and supply chain roles were just below at 1.7%. Despite above-average salary increases for many in the industry, there has been little change in salary dissatisfaction, remaining similar to last year's percentage of 55%. Of those who say they are considering leaving their current organisation in the next 12 months, 33% state that is due to their salary level, which is just over the overall UK average of 32%. This may be further increased due to the candidate short market we are experiencing, so those professionals who possess in-demand skills could see higher salary offerings from employers competing to attract or retain them. Outside of salary, the opportunity to develop professionally is an important aspect many industry professionals consider, and employers may face extended skills shortages if career progression needs are not met. Nearly 3/5 of employees say they expect to change roles in the next year, of whom 31% expect to move in the next 12 months. A key influence on that decision to move roles may be linked to perceptions of career progression. The percentage of professionals who feel there is no scope for career progression at their current organisation has remained similar year on year at over half. This feeling of a lack of career progression is the main reason for almost a quarter of employees wanting to move roles. Should this upward trend continue, this could further influence employee movement in the future. Employers can leverage this desire for progression by clearly publicising opportunities for career development when recruiting. Training and development opportunities play a key role in career progression, and 44% of employees say this is a key consideration when choosing a new role. Support for training and development can encompass third-party training such as that provided by SIPs, on-the-job training or mentoring. Another important factor for employers to consider as part of their recruitment and retention strategy is the work-life balance of employees. 45% of professionals rate their work-life balance as very poor to average, just above the UK average of 44%. Nearly a quarter of employees value work-life balance most when considering a new role, indicating the importance of maintaining and further improving employee sentiments when it comes to work-life balance. There is still work to be done, as mismatches are still present between what employees deem important compared to the benefits employers offer. For example, 69% of employees state that receiving over 25 days of annual leave is important, yet only 48% of employers offer this. Similarly, 63% of employees state that flexible working is important to them, but only 60% of employers offer this benefit. In addition, 27% of employers do not encourage any employees to take up flexible working options. Surprising, given that professionals increasingly inquire about the flexible working options when applying for a role. In such skills-short times, progressive employers should consider and enact policies conducive to greater work-life balance for their employees in order to be seen as an employer of choice and to attract top talent. In what has been a whistle-stop tour of some of our key survey findings, I'll just take a few moments now to summarise the key findings of our report. First, we have seen that despite the wider economic uncertainty caused by the UK's decision to leave the EU, employer confidence in activity for the year ahead remains positive. As a result of forecasted activity, recruitment remains a top priority for most organisations, with a particular focus on hiring permanent employees. However, acute skills shortages look set to be the key challenge for employers, especially in the digital space. In order to meet business objectives and alleviate pressure on staff, many employers will hire temporary professionals in the short term. In such a skills-short landscape, employers need to consider how best to attract and retain top talent, and it is clear that in addition to a salary and benefits, a positive work-life balance is important to the majority of candidates. Now let's look at what we recommend for employers during the year ahead. Firstly, we recommend that you make workforce planning a key strategic priority. Despite the positive sentiment that we see from organisations with regard to their current activity and plans, skills shortages remain prevalent in the market. Workforce planning needs to be a core component of every business strategy and at the top of the agenda. Understanding the range of workforce solutions available and considering the most appropriate options, factoring elements beyond just immediate people needs, but also risk mitigation and cost management, will help employers to put in place the most effective strategies for both the short and long term. This will enable employers to mitigate the effects of the skills shortages while continuing to meet their ambitious activity targets. Secondly, invest in your employer brand to compete for talent. Ensuring that you have a strong employer brand has never been more essential given how prevalent the skills shortages are. Competition for candidates has intensified, and employers should target their offering to appeal to the specific type of candidates they want to attract. Having a strong employee value proposition is central to this. Salary levels need to be benchmarked accurately and positioned correctly. Then progression opportunities and training investment needs to be publicised. Employees want to be able to get an insight into what it is truly like to work for an organisation, so they can assess whether they might be a strong fit with its culture. So make sure you clearly promote any benefits your organisation can offer, which helps achieve and maintain a positive work-life balance. More employees are actively seeking this information, so employers need to ensure they have a transparent message that is easily accessible online. Utilise contingent workers for more than just projects. Employers' drive for growth is putting significant pressure on employees, driven further by the high amount of skills shortages. Employers should reconsider their approach to hiring temporary workers. Whereas traditionally temporary, contract and interim workers have been used to supplement projects where specific skill sets are required, or to meet peaks in demand, they should be used to a greater extent to help alleviate some of the pressure from the increased workload. This will help to ensure growth plans can be sustained and targets met, while improving the job satisfaction for permanent employees. Finally, career planning is essential to attract and retain staff. Having the opportunity to progress their career is important to procurement, supply chain and logistics employees. Enabling professionals to continue developing their skills can not only help with candidate attraction and retention to your organisation, but can also help to alleviate skills shortages depending on the training they undertake. Regular one-to-one review meetings are key to building a dialogue between managers and team members to understand employee aspirations and what career progression looks like, to then allow your organisation to provide suitable opportunities where possible. And on that note, I will now pass you over to Trudy from SIPS, who will talk you through the Brexit storm.
Hello everyone, it's great to be here and thank you for joining us. I'm going to be focusing on the Brexit surveys that we ran twice this year, and also be drawing on other kind of data that we use and that supports the Brexit view. I'm SIPS PR manager. I've been at SIPS at the Institute for about 8 years. I don't have a background in economics nor procurement, but I'm happy to take more complicated questions to our economist, Dr. John Glenn, who's also a visiting fellow at Cranfield University, as he's the guy with all the knowledge. I do work on Voice of the Profession campaigns, so these are reflecting the view of the procurement community and also leading from the Institute itself, so working on practice papers, guidance and articles about the profession and of course Brexit. I do work also on the Market SIPS PMIs, which may be familiar to you, creating our public response to this quite complicated economic data in construction, manufacturing and services. The data does reflect what we find both in the Brexit surveys and also the risk index, which I'll also mention a little bit later on. And because the monthly data is very much on the ground, it says exactly what procurement people are thinking and experiencing, and is great data for people to use if they want to react to themselves and use in a kind of risk mitigation plans, that kind of thing. Now, the PMI data does show that there are issues over the impact of currency fluctuations, imports and things like labour shortages, because, of course, rates of immigration have lessened after the EU vote, it can be argued. But the PMI data is on the website, on the SIPS website, so please take a look and see if it's useful to you. I mean, if you want to know more about Brexit negotiations and how they're going, the top tip our economist tells us just to keep an eye on things like currency fluctuations. They're a clear indication of whether the negotiations are going well or badly. And also, of course, our Brexit surveys, we're going to be running 2 more of those this year just to see how the situation has changed and what the market reactions could be. Now, the PMI data generally shows that the businesses are just getting on with business. They're creating their own pathways, their own decisions, their own risk mitigation plans based on their own knowledge and their relationships with suppliers in the UK and the EU. The summer showed some fluctuations in the indices. It seems as if they were going to go below the no 50 change mark, then above the no 50 change, which showed what impact instability and uncertainty was having on businesses. But it seems now that things have settled down a little bit and businesses are concerned about how to move forward and not so concerned about currency fluctuations. And just very quickly, the three sectors that we deal with, manufacturing climbed to its highest level for 4 years. There was a sudden improvement in output, in new orders and employment, which was quite a surprise. Construction was also rising at its highest rate for 5 months, which was led by housing. But commercial and civil engineering subsectors, they lagged behind a little bit because they're more reliant on long-term investment, which is still relatively weak because of the uncertainty over Brexit. Services, the biggest contributor to UK GDP, showed a slightly different picture with slower rates of growth, but it's still above the no change level of 50. So in a combined picture, it just showed businesses were just getting on with it. So before I go into detail about the Brexit surveys, I just wanted to mention the findings of the SIPS Risk Index, which is powered by Dun & Bradstreet, our partners. They were showing a similar picture, really, to the Brexit surveys. Even though global risk had improved for the third straight quarter, there are underlying risks remaining. So even though the overall index showed there was an improvement, we're asked, you shouldn't really relax because there are other things happening that could simply just knock the index out of the park, really. So things like anti-globalization were a big issue, political risks in all regions of the world, and protectionism is a big issue, it seems, in many countries of the world, which is not great for global supply chains. So the SIPS Risk Index did show wider challenges. It showed that suppliers were being asked to look at their business continuity plans, so it wasn't just the buyers themselves who were building plans for their own businesses, but trying to understand how each tier of their supply chain was developing plans for Brexit and how they were going to be impacted, whether at a high level or to lower level. They're also negotiating force majeure clauses, so as procurement experts, you'll know all about these and the possible impact. Also discussing and building greater relationships with suppliers about supply chain risks. Do all your suppliers understand how they're going to be impacted on a global scale and how that's going to affect your business? And things like supply assurance programs and any early warning signs of any supply chain disruption, so you can make contingency plans to try and mitigate against that. Because we're talking about leaving the EU, there are risks of sourcing from new supplies from new countries, so that's something that we're encouraging our professionals to take a look at, using PMI data, the risk index and the Brexit survey data, and also sort of balancing the price risk with the macro risks involved in supply on a global scale. So a quick summary of what we found from the SIPS Brexit survey. So we ran 2 in the year, in May and in September, because we wanted to see what the change was going to be between the kind of 6 months, pretty much. We're going to be doing the same this year as well to see if the picture has changed and if there is anything interesting, because we've been talking to the Bank of England, we've been talking to quite a few businesses about how this may impact them and what our surveys had shown. I mean, it has to be acknowledged that the clock is ticking on Brexit, and the UK and EU supply chains are really beginning to react now. I think there was possibly a period of a few months where people just really didn't know where to turn and what to do. Many businesses have also been quite vocal in warning the Brexit negotiations that this continuing uncertainty was going to have real economic effects more than 16 months ahead of the official leave date of March the 29th, 2019. And the second SIPS survey, as you can see here, certainly shows that business reactions to the Brexit talks showed that uncertainty does have an impact. The Brexit negotiations must face that EU and UK businesses are making decisions about investments and goods and service provision and what's going to happen in 2019, but they're making those decisions today and right now because of the increased uncertainty. Now, businesses are also preparing themselves for what they think could be the worst case scenario, so that is probably a hard Brexit, where there is no freedom of movement of goods, no freedom of movement of people, and there may be sort of fewer talented workers if that's the case. And even though politicians are saying that a softer Brexit is still more likely, even though the first stage of negotiations have kind of been signed off, it's still evident that negotiations are heading in a place that is less than certain. So businesses are just making changes and just going ahead and doing what they think is best. Now, it seems the most dramatic impact from the survey, which was around 1,000 people that we talked to, is that EU businesses, around 63%, are expecting to move some or all of their supply chain out of the UK, and that's up from 44% from the last year. Now, this impact is coupled with a decrease of EU workers coming into the UK and also the migration of existing EU nationals working in the UK out of our labour market, and that's creating a real danger in the mind of EU businesses and workers that, you know, the UK is no longer in business and doesn't want to do business with the rest of the world. Now, that danger means that supply chains could be located onto the EU mainland, so they may actually stay there, and that UK jobs and skills will be lost. And this is kind of further enhanced that by the fact that 40% of UK businesses are looking to replace EU suppliers. So this could be seen as good for UK manufacturers and workers if the capacity and skills exist within UK PLC to replace EU suppliers. But there is a significant danger, certainly in the short term, that UK manufacturing capacity and the skills of UK workers are not there to replace EU providers, and the result is possibly higher costs for supply chains and also wage inflation, which is the kind of thing that Linda was saying too. Okay, so we also asked our respondents what they thought the challenges were for Brexit negotiations and what it could be. And these are the top 5 impacts they thought would actually happen. So a lack of time is certainly, the clock is ticking. They also thought the UK's had a very weak negotiation position, so we were not going to get the best deal before 2019. Also, a lack of sector and business knowledge, and of course, the negotiation skills and expertise, which procurement professionals are very good at. And also a lack of supply chain expertise and a lack of understanding what really supply chains mean for businesses around the world and for the UK itself. In fact, SIPS was invited to appear at the House of Commons Select Committee recently on logistics and supply chain, and our director, Duncan Brock, was there to talk about what it meant for supply chains, and SIPS was there at the forefront talking to government as well as businesses, so that was a fantastic opportunity. Okay, so the first survey certainly showed some slight sectoral differences. So in manufacturing, we found that the top concern was that currency fluctuations were causing price inflation, which made it very difficult to do business. The top concerns were also about keeping possible tariffs to a minimum, and 50% of our respondents felt that was one of the biggest issues facing the government. Also keeping red tape low, I mean, that is particularly important for the automotive industry, that perhaps shifts parts from one area to another area, and if tariffs and red tape are attached to each of those parts, it makes cars very expensive and makes products very expensive. They also looked about reshaping their supply chain, so should they be moving their operations to the UK? Should they be finding suppliers even outside the EU, so further afield? And some of them actually said that part or all of their business was going to cease to exist because of the UK's decision to leave. So retail and wholesale, very dependent on global supply chains. They also said that currency fluctuations had a big impact, causing huge price inflations and a scrabble really to renegotiate contracts very quickly to ensure that precious margins were not lost in business. And they were also looking for new suppliers, so either in the UK, which is obviously a fantastic opportunity for the UK, or outside the EU entirely. And their concerns, again, are slightly higher, was that they were keeping potential tariffs low, trying to keep the supply chains moving as quickly as possible, and also keeping red tape absolutely minimal as well. We've heard very high-profile stories about banking and finance, about banking industries moving their offices to different countries in the EU. Again, they said currency fluctuations was a big thing that was causing price inflation for them, and similar things in addition to what the other sectors were saying about keeping tariffs and quotas to a minimum and ensuring the free movement of labour and also talented people as well, to ensure that their businesses were maintained. And also in the banking and finance industries, there are issues over maintaining regulations too, and 17% of respondents believed that was going to be a problem. The next big sector that was covered by the first survey, now the second survey will show sector results, and we're going to be launching that in January time, and that's going to be primarily around the public sector and also manufacturing, as we found that there was a different level of respondents for each of the surveys, so we're going to be focusing on slightly different sectors in the new year. But certainly in the May survey, energy and utilities, again, talked about currency fluctuations, and they were very quick to renegotiate contracts and try and get everything kind of a lot cheaper, really. And they also found they had challenges around long-term planning. Again, it's about uncertainty and not knowing what was going to happen with the negotiations. Now, their concerns, it was quite different in that there was a higher percentage of respondents that thought tariffs and quotas to be kept to a minimum was going to be of more concern to them at 53%, but also they were concerned about red tape and the free movement of labour. So on to more practical aspects. The SIPS website does have some guidance on what to do to prepare and goes into a little bit more detail. But some of this may seem sort of quite obvious, really, about auditing the supply chain from end to end, seeing who is within all the tiers of supply chains, trying to develop more deep relationships with suppliers to see how they can actually help businesses make their Brexit plans, and regular ongoing communication to keep things going. Of course, prioritising to see what is most important, what's going to be most impactful to the business, and doing risk analysis, and also looking at all the contracts, you know, what's planned, what's current, an opportunity to perhaps look at the supplier base and see what needs to change, because as well as risks, there are always opportunities, so there may be ways of doing business in a different way. To keep researching and just to monitor the situation very closely, and to work cross-functionally, and that is within the business itself, but also with suppliers and other partners. So looking at the impact assessment, we're talking about what the possible outcomes could be, or what deals could arise. So when we talked about risks versus opportunities, there may be some good deals that could be made. And looking at, are you sourcing from inside the UK directly or further down the supply chain, and just understanding where the impact will hit. For instance, any maintenance or support services that might actually be based with EU suppliers that may not have occurred to you, and are any of your contracts in a monopoly situation that a supplier might exploit? So the PMI data showed that some buyers were saying that suppliers were taking advantage of the situation and the currency fluctuations by just increasing prices that little bit more, and certainly if there were a sole supplier. Looking at possible alternative local sources of supply. Now, the government has said that they are trying to develop policies to increase the manufacturing base in the UK, seeing that there may be opportunities post-Brexit. But can decisions be made about local sources of supply immediately? Is this something that can be done? And also having a look at logistics. Can you change or increase border controls? These may cause delays for you, so how will that impact on you? There are also financial implications. Any of your suppliers, are they benefiting from EU grants or funding that you may not be aware of? So that's where developing closer relationships with suppliers will bring that out. And will that put you at risk if they lose the funding that they've relied on for all this time? Also looking at contracts, which are most sensitive to price fluctuations and from interest rate and exchange volatility. Can you do something about that? Also looking at exposure on profitability and cash flow, of course, as a result of increased supply chain costs. Excuse me, just losing my voice there. And people do have a big impact, as Linda was saying earlier. What activities do you need to look at? What contracts are reliant on EU labour? Will you be exposed to a talent shortage? Now, this was raised in the PMIs as well, that the manufacturing construction sector said that they didn't actually have all the skills that they required to keep going, and that actually might change as we go towards 2019. Looking at what other sources of labour, skill or capability will be available, and these labour implications, should you then start considering whether your own workforce should be increased to try and mitigate against the loss of any EU nationals that could be working for you, and that kind of thing. Of course, there is the issue of compliance and any legal issues. So what's the legal jurisdiction of a particular contract of yours with a supplier? So I understand from some of our procurement professionals that some are looking at seeing how they can actually change the jurisdiction of the contract that they currently have. So do they want EU law to apply to the contract? Do they want UK law to apply to the contract? So that's something that could actually make trade a lot easier. Something around deregulation, will it make trade easier? We talked again about opportunities and risks. And looking at IP ownership of very critical products that could be EU-based that you may not be aware of. And with all of us getting very concerned about GDPR, are you transferring any personal data with your EU-based suppliers that you shouldn't be? Is that going to be changing in May next year when GDPR comes into force? So another consideration there. So very quick summary, Brexit uncertainty, that's probably the biggest challenge that's been borne out by our Brexit surveys, by the PMIs, by the risk index, and it's certainly one of the biggest challenges in a generation or two. Looking at your risks, analysing very clearly and prioritising what to tackle first obviously is very key. Being informed and prepared, looking at what's happening with the negotiations, seeing what other people are doing. We certainly ask for case studies all the time from companies about what they are doing, but we find that companies are being very quiet about what they're doing, what plans they're doing, and we don't know whether it's because the plans aren't being made or they don't want to share, but by sharing and talking about it and trying to develop some sort of guidance and understanding what the impacts are, it kind of supports the entire procurement community. And to take the lead in reshaping supply chains, because by sitting back and waiting to see what's going to happen is not necessarily going to be great for your business. We often talk about procurement professionals leading from the front and just trying to develop their own businesses and being at the top table. This is an opportunity to do that. And here are some ideas that came from Duncan Brock, our Director of Customer Solutions, and he's talking about all the different areas that every procurement person should have a look in preparation for Brexit. Over to you, Ellie.
Brilliant. So this is Linda again from Hayes. So we have had one question here, which is, with acute skills shortages, what can employers do to overcome these? Now, employers need to look hard at their training offering to overcome skills shortages. Training enables upskilling and reskilling of your workforce to ensure they have the tools needed to meet your changing business goals. This is particularly important in light of increasing automation, with now software or work platforms being implemented. A good training offering will also help you to be able to hire more junior employees and then teach them the skills they need to fill their roles. And we have one final question here, which is, how can you tailor your employee brand to attract different candidates? Creating a strong employer brand can really help your organisation to stand out from the competition when recruiting talent. Your employer value proposition may need to be tailored to different audiences to help you find the skills you need. For example, in order to attract professionals across different generations, while Generation Z candidates place highest value on career development, when looking for a new role, baby boomers instead focus more on work-life balance. So evaluate what is important to the professionals you want to attract and ensure that your employee value proposition clearly promotes this. Trudy, I don't know if you have anything to add?
Just really about attracting sort of good candidates. I mean, certainly in procurement, we, as an institute, we try and be at the forefront. You know, we talk to government as well as to businesses to say, well, actually, you need to talk to your procurement professionals. They know what they're talking about. So it's that issue. If you're in procurement, you're listened to, you're kind of highly regarded. So I think that helps with career progression, and it certainly is great for an individual to know that businesses are kind of relying on them, really. And also, I just wanted to add something really about, certainly in the manufacturing sector, and our economist often talks about this, is that, you know, we've lost a third of our manufacturing base since the 70s and 80s during the Thatcher years, and actually global supply chains have kind of been born of that kind of environment since the Thatcher years. So looking at how we can encourage skills and how we can develop those skills in manufacturing, is people going to develop more kind of inshore opportunities? You know, how is government going to manage all that? And attracting talented workforce is very difficult. You know, if you can't offer them money, can you offer them something else? Can you offer them great benefits? Or, you know, there can be a whole range of skills and abilities and offerings that you can give them.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, we've had another question regarding if we expect to see a high number of supplier relationship professionals given the amount of change management ahead. Yes, definitely. I think our recent salary guide has shown that, you know, supplier relationship management is definitely a profession that is increasing. We are seeing more and more of these jobs coming out. So absolutely, I think this is definitely a developing function and a developing job title that I think we will see more and more of those positions over the next 12 months.
And I think our surveys have borne that out as well. And they're saying you need actually higher skills and more skills in this area because perhaps the government needs that support.
Trudy, there's a question here for you about case studies and sharing information. Do you know what SIPs are going to be doing to kind of push this idea?
Oh, I'm constantly asking businesses if they could kind of go public, really, about what they are doing. So I have been talking to quite a few as a result of Brexit, but people do tend to sit back and are just waiting to see what happens, really. But we're saying to everybody, I think you have to talk about what you're doing, because once that conversation starts, you may be able to get ideas about what other people are doing. I don't think it's a matter of anybody doing the wrong thing, because I don't think we're in a position to say that anyone's doing anything wrong at the moment, because we still really don't know. So any case studies that we get or any support, any guidance that we have, we will publish on the website. So please keep looking, and please do contribute to the next Brexit survey, which is around April time as well, so we can develop more of those case studies. And in fact, we're going to change the way that the survey is run, so we can contact people directly and ask them to give us more information about what they're doing. I hope that's enough.
Thank you. We have a question here about do we find that employers are educating employees on the Brexit impact? Are they providing support? I would say at the moment this is still so unknown that employers aren't able to give employees advice. Whilst the government is still unsure of what that looks like, that there isn't really any advice they can give them. Obviously this will develop as the next few months go on and when we get further down that journey, but I would say at the moment our employers aren't sure, so that there isn't much in the way of support they can give. Now that's actually it for our questions today. So thank you all for joining. I hope that's been useful. If you want to request a copy of the guide, there is a link on the next slide. So you just go onto the Hays website. You can request a copy of the guide, which will give you a lot more detail behind what we've discussed today. Thank you very much, everybody.